Hey guys, welcome back to the stream. This is Rod Arriagada coming to you live from Pine Creek First Nation, and we're here for the 2021 Chief and Council Candidates Forum. This is live coverage brought to you by Turtle Nation Holdings. I'm Rod Arriagada. I'll be your host, your commentator, if you will. And we're gonna just kind of give a few minutes here for members to come in and join in on the stream, and then we're gonna get into things. And we're gonna have Derek Nipinak coming in right away to present his platform speech. He's gonna do it via Zoom, so we're gonna take this view and zoom in on the screen that's in front of you. You guys can see a little bit of it there. Gonna pop up his name, and we're just gonna wait a few minutes, and as soon as we're good to get started, we're gonna get going. There it is. We're gonna keep him in the view so you guys can see him. Got about a dozen people in here, so we're gonna give it a couple more minutes. Derek, you can hear me? Okay, so as we're trying to explain, so you're going to have 50 minutes to present your platform. If you come up short, or even if you don't, then after that, we're going to ask you a few questions. The members have an opportunity to be able to ask questions that they want to ask. I'm going to be screening those questions, of course. If there is no questions by the time that you're done presenting your platform, then I have about a dozen questions that were asked throughout the day so far. I'll just ask you a few of those questions for you to be able to answer back. And then once we're done with the questions, I'll tell you when it's the last question coming up, and at that point, you can just close out your speech however you want. We got about 20 people now, 22, so we'll start about maybe 30 seconds from now. I'll let you know right away. Zoom in on the picture there so we can see you a little bit better. And yeah, so you can go ahead. Derek Nipinak, this is one of your chief candidates coming up right now. He's going to present his platform over Zoom. And Derek, you can start anytime you're ready.
Okay, Miigwech, thank you for organizing this evening's event. I guess it's been most of the day and into the evening, and I want to congratulate the candidates for council as well as for chief, and of course the nominators and the people for putting together I think an event that's very important. It's very important for the community members out there to hear what the vision is of the leaders who are coming forward and vying for support as we look to take our community, Pine Creek, into the future. I'm Derek Nipinak, Nibin Makwa, Indigenous Makwa. It's my honor this evening to identify a few of the very important matters I believe that are outstanding and continuing issues for the community. As everybody knows, I was originally chief in 2008, and there was a number of issues that were presented at that time, but there's also they seem to be ongoing. Although we've seen, I think, some really good progress in the last few years. Some of these issues are continuing to carry us into the future, and one of them that I wanted to raise right out of the gate here was the issue of land claims. In 2008, I received a letter when I was a new chief from the federal government, saying that they wanted to settle one of our claims, being the unlawful surrender of Duck Bay. They offered to settle for a discussion and negotiation around 474 acres, which was a shortfall on the original creation of the Pine Creek Reserve after the Duck Bay Reserve was surrendered. But in order to have that negotiation with Canada, they asked us as leadership to indemnify them. That means to hold them libelous and to release them of any future liability that may arise for Canada with respect to the unlawful surrender of Duck Bay. I refuse to do that. And to this day, this particular claim remains outstanding. I believe that it's not up to the Pine Creek First Nation leadership to indemnify Canada on the unlawful surrender of the Duck Bay Reserve. What I believe is that it's up to the Duck Bay people that are both members of Pine Creek as well as not members of Pine Creek, because many of the treaty descendants from Treaty 4 who became Bill C-31s after 1985 are on the Pine Creek banned list, and they're owed a discussion. And I believe that it was in 2018 or 17 that I brought an opportunity to the Chief and Council to form a land claims review committee. A land claims review committee that would be made up of representatives from Pine Creek, Duck Bay, and Camperville to sit down to take a look at our history, to gather our elders' knowledge, but also the written record. And that means going back into the archives and having a review of our claim, resubmitting it, and arriving at a truth that we can all agree upon. That historical truth will have to include, I believe, publications of our history that both our children and future generations can read and learn from and understand. I believe there is a common history amongst all of our families. A lot of Pine Creek families are tied to Duck Bay. A lot of Duck Bay families are tied to Pine Creek as well as Camperville. So I think it's a discussion that we need to have, and I believe that with that type of discussion in place, we can rework the facts of what the unlawful surrender of Duck Bay was, and we can begin a negotiation with Canada. I have raised this issue already directly with Indigenous Crown Services Minister Carolyn Bennett. It was about a year and a half ago now that I sat down and I had lunch with her, and I said, Pine Creek, Duck Bay, Camperville need to have a discussion about what claims we can bring forward, and she was open to that discussion. So that is one of the big pieces that remains outstanding from 2008. I know that different claims have been launched in that time. I understand there was a specific claim that was launched in 2020 by the current Chief and Counsel. We'll take a review of that, and we'll look at what are the implications on the unlawful surrender, which I believe is the big claim that we need to be discussing, and we'll go from there. Community governance is also another one of the pillars of my campaign statement. I think it's time that we once again begin focusing on the work that was done, I'd say almost a generation ago now, 20 some odd years ago, regarding the Minigwazibi and Anishinaabe Constitution. I, in my professional capacity, have continued to do work around governance and constitutional development with Treaty 5, for example. I've done some constitution work in Saskatchewan with a very large Cree community out there. I believe that, as soon as we identify as a community what our core policies are, what our core principles and fundamentals, what we believe in as a community, we can begin to, I think, find common ground to implement in a better way our Constitution. This includes being ready for emergencies. I know that emergencies have been a major issue in the last couple of years, specifically as climate change continues to accelerate. We're seeing more and more of the impacts of climate change. I believe the pandemic is also part of that. But wildfires, are we adequately prepared for emergencies? Do we have a fire guard in place? Are we strategically growing trees in locations to provide for protection? All of these things need to come into play. But also when it comes to community governance, I think we need to also zero in on the financial administration law. That's some of the work that I helped do in the early days of the current Chief and Counsel, was to finalize the pieces on the financial administration law, which gives you access to the First Nations Finance Authority. When you get to that point, then you can start talking with Canada about block funding agreements. They're doing 10-year block funding agreements for communities that are within the Finance Authority scope of services. And that allows for a lot more flexibility when it comes to how you design the delivery of your programs and services in the community. I think that's a critical piece of work to continue. Going along with all of that includes, your review of your human resource policy, your finance policy, and at one time in the past, I even spoke about the establishment of a finance committee, and that is a committee of community members who can meet on occasion, perhaps quarterly, to talk about the finances of the band, how's the band operating, and just to make sure that there's accountability and transparency within that financial administration. One of the other pillars that I wanted to raise was the issue around economic development. Economic development is a major piece of the puzzle when we talk about on-reserve and off-reserve services, or the denial of on-reserve and off-reserve services. We're living in a time now where a lot of our community members who live off-reserve says the community doesn't do anything for me, and it's not doing anything for me. Well, that's because a lot of our funding is tied to on-reserve services. In order to get past that, we need to develop an economic base for ourselves through the generation of our what's called own source revenue. Own source revenue currently is derived from things like the tobacco rebate, things like profits from the gas bar, VLTs when they're operating can create a surplus of funds, which can be act as retained earnings for reinvestment or for discretionary spending in the community. But we've got to go beyond that. What I'm talking about is bringing new money into the community. New money is what builds economy, and I really do believe that the Dauphin lands are the future of economic development for our community, not just in terms of driving revenue for the support of government functions, but also in the area of job creation. If we can put a vision together, develop a commercial development strategy for that site, there's so much opportunity and potential there. And in fact, in the last 2 years, I did bring a project proposal forward to the Chief and Council to identify an anchor tenant. An anchor tenant is a AAA quality company. One of the oldest companies in Canada was willing and ready to put infrastructure and make an investment in that location. Having a AAA anchor tenant allows you to leverage the dollar on the lease payments that they bring in. And when you leverage the dollar, then you're able to bring in other vendors, such as maybe a Starbucks or a Subway or a Pita Pit, or and you're able to commercially develop the site based on the needs of the community, based on what we want, but also what the city of Dauphin wants. And I think that that's what's going to drive revenue into the future, is more people going to that site, spending their money there, and then us taking our chunk. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to walk into a store in Dauphin and see our people working there, our people ringing up the till, our people handling the transaction, from our communities? I think that would be something that would be really nice to see. And I do believe it would have a positive impact in terms of how we relate to other communities, because it would also create job opportunities, not just for us, but also for communities like Ebenflow, communities like Tutnazi, Ochichaks, Skownan, as well as other outlying communities in the area. So that's a really big piece, I think, that I would like to focus on. It means converting the land potentially from fee simple, what it is right now, into reserve land, and then do what's called a commercial land designation. I can speak about these things because they're things I've done professionally in my work when I've not been a politician. I've successfully participated in land conversion in Saskatchewan. I know the processes. I know the legalities around the voting criteria for commercial designation. I know the legalities around establishing a head lease with the Crown, the establishment of corporate infrastructure, so that we can put businesses in place that are going to be successful. And finally, my last point that I wanted to raise was around health and wellness. Health and wellness to me is a major issue, especially during the pandemic. And we've faced tremendous difficulty. And it's not just our community members that are on reserve, but all of our community members have suffered greatly because of the pandemic when it comes to mental health and the challenges around being in the lockdown. We need to develop a climate change readiness strategy that's not just going to deal with the blockades on the roads and so forth. We need to figure out ways of taking care of one another. And that means figuring out ways of addressing mental health challenges and mental health problems that can arise when people don't have access to one another. We're naturally a social people. We like to interact. We like to go to the VLTs. We like to sit around at the arena and have some fries and gravy and talk and laugh and joke. But when those things are taken away from us, what can happen is our mental health can be impacted. And I think that I speak for many of us when I say that I think we've all struggled with mental health issues during the pandemic, whether it be depression, whether it be inability to sleep at night. All kinds of different challenges go with that. So we really have to be ready, on the health and wellness side for future issues such as that. A lot of it is tied into climate change, and as I said before, these issues are escalating. And are we ready for the next evacuation notice? These are things that need to be focused on and zeroed in on. When it comes to health and wellness as well, do we have local sports and social activities for our young people? When I was chief back in 2008, we always made investments in the young people, whether that was in their hockey development, development or whether that was in their education. I ensured, when we were able to receive tobacco rebates again, because when I started, we didn't have any tobacco rebates, but when we did, I ensured that money was set aside for the schools, because I wanted to sponsor, youth to be able to travel. And, during that year that we were able to get some revenues in, the youth were able to travel. I believe it was all the way down into the southern United States on a trip because of their school grades. So giving children the opportunity to see the world is a huge piece of it, but also promoting sports and wellness and health. And one final piece I wanted to raise around health and wellness is a very, very significant, I believe, a piece of work that I focused on for the last 2 years. I was working with my partners, my business partners, and we put together a proposal for the establishment of an emergency shelter for women and children. This emergency shelter has since been approved for to be housed on the Kisikonan Ojibwe Nation, which is on the Riding Mountain. I brought the proposal forward to the chiefs of the West Region through the Child and Family Service Agency, and I asked all the chiefs to support the proposal. Because what this shelter is going to do is it's going to allow for women and children who are escaping violence on reserve to stay at this shelter and receive culturally appropriate and culturally sensitive services for the time that they need them, prior to transitioning back to their home or transitioning into a different home from which they left. This is one of the very significant pieces that flows from the recommendations from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, but it also goes back to earlier work that was done in terms of advocating for the national inquiry on MMIWG. People often say that nothing comes of the work of politics and it's all talk, but I believe that we've seen this through, and we're going to see a $3 million building go up in the community of Kisikonan. It's going to service Pine Creek and all the West Region communities, and there's going to be millions of dollars of operational supports that are going to be put in place to make sure that it's properly staffed and to make sure that we have an ability to provide services to women and children who do not want to stay in a home where there's violence or there's safety issues. And that to me is a very, very significant piece of work. I contributed to that, but it takes a team for these things to work, and it's going to take an even bigger community effort to make sure that this service is provided to the people of Pine Creek. So with that said, those are my primary campaign pieces. I'm wary of the fact that these are ideas, and the reality on the ground is that people in our community are going to drive the agenda forward. It's not just one person. There's no I in this. This is all about working together. And my style of governance, whether it be at the community or whether it be as the Grand Chief, was always around consensus building. I always sought consensus, and I always had an open ear to reflect upon people's truths, because we don't all see the world the same way. And it's very important that the leadership that the community selects is a leadership that is prepared to listen, and a leadership that's prepared to work with the people. And that my friends and family, I believe, is fundamental to the success of any leadership. So that is my campaign statement. Thank you so much for listening, and miigwech.
Right on, Derek. So we're going to get to a couple of questions. There's nobody actually made a comment for a question on here, so we're just going to go back to some of the questions that were asked to other candidates prior to you. And I'm going to ask you a few questions. Once I'm done, then you'll have a chance to close out, and then that will be it for today. So we'll start off with the first one here. I got, what kind of jobs would you bring into the community if you're elected?
Well, first and foremost, we have to look at the big projects that are there, and I do believe that a lot of those big projects are already currently under contract. So the contractors are responsible for creating local employment. So I want to make sure that we're maximizing local employment within the contracts, within the projects. So that means laborers need to be hired. If they're not already hired, it means subcontractors who are skilled tradespeople need to be looked at, and they need to be put on these big projects as they're available. The jobs that are created in the community are really the outcome of the local economy that's driven by the demands of the people. So we have a gas bar that creates employment at management, assistant management, but also front line. On the front line, I believe that there may be more food outlets for the community. So I think that would be good for jobs that are catering towards providing food services, such as maybe a pizza place or a burger place. Those types of jobs in the community, but also off the community. Once the Dauphin lands are developed, there's going to be 100 jobs at that location, for our community members. And if we need to, in Pine Creek, we could set up a shuttle service that can travel from early in the morning to the Dauphin commercial site and back again. Because I know that's common in some places, especially where there's casinos, for community members to be shuttled to and from their workplace. So there's lots of jobs to be created once we get the economic engine rolling.
All right. The next question I got for you, it starts off with a comment that says, security promotes a healthy community. How will you implement safety measures that attracts new investments in housing for existing on-reserve and new off-reserve commercial infrastructure and technology?
Sorry, can you ask that one more time? I didn't catch the first part.
It says, security promotes a healthy community. How will you implement safety measures that attracts new investments in housing, commercial infrastructure, and technology?
There's a lot of work to be done. Obviously, there's not enough houses in the community. We have to look at what available resources we have that can be leveraged. I'm not one that likes to spend community money, because I think community money should be leveraged instead of spent. And that means, going to the banks, going to the finance authority and finding out how do we find the lowest cost dollar to be able to build infrastructure that's needed. That's a starting point. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to identify different types of housing as well to address the different demographics in the community. We have a young population, just like First Nations communities across the country. We have a young population, young parents, young children. Do we have enough homes that accommodate 3 and 4 bedrooms? Do we have enough homes that accommodate a single person? Is there an option to build out homes that are safe and secure, but also mini homes? You can do smaller sized footprints that are also, I think, focused on net zero. Net zero is a whole nother discussion, but identifying like small carbon footprints that allow for housing units to be built in volume to accommodate single people in the community. There's lots of different options that are out there. Now, when it comes to technology, I understand that there's been some discussion with Clear Sky Connections, which is which is a Manitoba First Nations owned internet technology company. I'm not sure where that is at, but we could create our own internet service provider as a community. We could start by creating our own corporate identity around information technology, and we could then build an ISP, which could then provide internet services to the community. That's around the issue of technology. But there's lots of options, and once we're grounded and once we know what we have to work with, then that's when decisions and planning can be made more succinctly.
Okay, the next question is, if you are elected, will you ensure that all members get treated equally, whether they're on reserve or off reserve, including the members that live in Winnipeg?
I think it's very important to recognize our scenario as a community is that the budgets that we operate within, and I've never really been a really big fan of federal government programs and service funding agreements. If you worked with me in the past, you'll know that I never signed funding agreements with Canada because I do not believe that they represent the needs of our communities. A lot of the formulas that are driving the programs and service budgets that make it to the community are per capita formulas that are outdated because they're not keeping up with the Indian Register. They don't know who's in our community and who isn't. You can just take a look at the voters list as an example of that. So that skews the formulas that they're working from. We need to, I think, focus on firstly helping them identify what our actual numbers are in the community, because they don't know. They have no idea, but yet they're driving formulas for funding that are based on that. So these budgets that are coming into the community, they're underfunded even for our on-reserve population. And yet we have upwards, they say now, of 60% of our community lives off reserve. So what do we have in our treasury as a First Nation to service the needs of off reserve members? That is a practical challenge. It's a real challenge for our community to help off reserve members in the same way that is expected for on reserve members, and that creates, I think, an issue around discrimination, and that discrimination is built into the way they're funding our communities, and it's not right and it's not fair. The only way to address some of that is to get our economic engine rolling, to be able to drive own source revenue, as I said before. And I'm not just talking about VLTs or tobacco rebate. I'm talking about real resources, real wealth that can be generated to provide supplements to our budgets, to our federal budgets, so that we can provide off-reserve services to a level that people can be comfortable with and proud of. Because right now there's nothing there, and we have to be better at accommodating our off-reserve population, because a lot of people were forced out of the community. They're forced out of the community because there's no housing and there's a lack of opportunity, but there's a lot of people who want to come home. And if we can do more to let people come home by making sure that there's houses there, making sure that there's economy and jobs to be created there, I think we can go a long way in addressing some of that on-reserve, off-reserve disparity that's there. But everybody deserves to be treated equally. Now that's a principle of governance that I've always followed. But when it comes to the ability to actually exchange and provide for financial services and social supports for community members on and off reserve, that's a whole other discussion, and it's limited and it's challenging. And there's no easy solution to that. And anybody that says there's an easy solution is kidding themselves, because it's an uphill battle every day. So that's a difficult question, but I've seen it many, many times, and I've seen the outcomes of efforts to try to change it.
All right. Another question I got here for you is, okay, so they're saying, I guess in the past, a lot of hiring has been done through family, favoritism, that kind of stuff. People are wondering, if you get elected, if you will ensure that people are being hired based on qualifications instead of favoritism.
I think that's what I was referring to when I talked about procurement. I think that leadership has a responsibility at the chief and council level to identify ways for people to make good decisions around hiring. One of the ways we do that is not just through a strong HR policy, but making sure that there's a procurement policy in place for when projects are available for hiring people locally. That means that if there's conflict of interest in selecting, for example, sometimes when you're doing hiring, you have an interview panel. Now, if one of those panelists is a relative, or if one of those panelists has a bias against a candidate who's applying for the job, then they should declare that they have a bias or that they're in a conflict of interest. These are types of things that can be learned through effective implementation of policies. So I do believe that when people are vying for a position in the community, that fairness has to take precedent, consideration and fairness and kindness. And that means that implementing a proper HR policy in place is critical. I don't know if there's an HR policy that's being implemented or if it's being followed, but I see a lot of job postings in the community. I think that's a really good practice. I think it's important that that continues so that people have a fair opportunity to at least apply for a position. The challenge is, of course, is that we have a fairly small community. So, someone who walks through the door is going to be, the brother or somebody, or the sister of somebody, or the cousin of somebody, or the aunt or uncle of somebody. And when those issues present themselves, we have to deal with them through kindness, and we've got to be willing to step aside in the decision making when it comes to how it impacts, a close relative or a family member.
All right. Yeah, that's okay, man. So another question we got here is, what are you going to do in order to keep the band in good financial order, considering that they're moved in a positive direction?
There's lots that can be done. Accountability and transparency to the membership, to me, is more important than reporting to INAC or ISC, as it's called today. The community members need to know what is the state of the finances, how are decisions being made around spending, and the why around spending. I'm a little bit different in the way I look at the financial situation in the community, because I know how bands operate very well, but I also know how organizations operate. And it's important for everyone to understand that almost every dollar that comes in to Pine Creek is funded through a contribution agreement from the Government of Canada that sources from the Treasury Board of Canada, which also gets us marching orders from the Prime Minister and a handful of people. So there's influences that are happening at a regional level, at a national level, that impact how much money gets actually brought out into the region and spent in the contribution agreements at the community level. So it's important, I think, that people understand that, and I think having a finance committee that reviews finances on a quarterly basis gets to learn how spending works and how money works at the community level. I think that goes a long way in helping people understand how money is spent, and it keeps people accountable as well. That to me is important, and really about following budgets. Budgets exist within the funding agreements. There's called line items, and each line item has a budget. That budget needs to be followed to the greatest extent possible. And if there's variances from the line item budget, then those variances have to be reported. If there's a significant variance, then the leadership needs to know right away, because that can create deficits. Deficits create clawbacks. They also create financial liability for the community. And it's important to understand these things, because the funding that comes into the community is not the same as the money that ends up in your pocket. It's different. It's treated much differently. And there's reporting standards back to Indigenous Services Canada that have to be followed through reporting and annual audits. But there's also a new level, and I believe that there has to be accountability owed to the First Nation community. Our families deserve to know how the money is being spent, where it's being spent, and why it's being spent. And that to me is very, very important.
All right, there are good answers so far, man. I got one last question for you, and after that, you can go ahead and close out your speech for today. Okay, the last question is, Pine Creek First Nation filed land claims with the federal government. What will you do to reignite or fuel that process?
Well, I touched upon it a little bit when I made the introduction. I do believe that land claims are a very, very significant issue, because what happened 130, 140 years ago is still unfinished business when it comes to the Crown and the Crown agents at the time, and how they dealt with the Treaty 4 people, the Treaty 2 people that moved into Pine Creek. We have to sit down and we have to have an honest discussion about who fits where, and we need to talk about the history and what history can we live with, because I do believe that there's an entire 2 generations of people who are non-status people that are actually treaty people from Treaty 4 that were attached to the Duck Bay people. Like I said, some of the Duck Bay people were reinstated and they became Pine Creek band members. There's actually a large number of Duck Bay families that are Pine Creek band members. The issue is that you can file a specific claim into the Specific Claims Tribunal, and you can start a process with them. But have we arrived at the truth that we can all live with? Have all of our families from the different communities, whether it be Camperville or Duck Bay or Pine Creek, been accommodated, and have they been listened to? I understand there was a filing of a claim in 2020, a cows and plows claim filed by a law firm in Alberta. I'd like to see that claim. I don't know why it wasn't properly shared with the community. Whether or not that claim should proceed has to be balanced against the interests of all families in our community. That's what I see going forward. These issues were brought up with the previous chief directly, but they remain a discussion that needs to be had, and it's a discussion that I'm not afraid to bring forward. It has to be had, because I do believe that we owe that to one another as a community. Our children deserve to know our history, and they need to know it thoroughly. And and that's what claims are all about. It's about arriving at a history that we can accept and proceeding forward to restore the covenant of treaty that's owed to our people. There's a lot of Treaty 2 people in Pine Creek. There's also a lot of Treaty 4 people. But let's have that discussion and let's figure out where people land. And I believe we'll be stronger in the end because of it.
Okay, you can go ahead and close out your speech now, Derek.
Okay. Good questions. I see 15 minutes turned into 20, 35 minutes, and that's okay. I don't mind engaging in the difficult discussion and in the difficult questions. I've been at this for a long time, and I've always put my best heart forward for the people. My closing comments are quite simple. I think that the election starts tomorrow. The advance poll in Dauphin is tomorrow, then Brandon on Wednesday, and then Winnipeg on Thursday, the 24th. I just wanted to talk about the advance polls in the context of the mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots are actually quite a simple process. You send in the form with your address, they mail you the form, you fill out your ballot, you sign the form, and then you send it back to the electoral officer. But what potentially happens is sometimes those mail-in ballots get diverted, or they don't arrive in the mail. What you can do is, if you didn't get your mail-in ballot in the mail, or if you don't think you're going to get enough time to send it back in before the election, before the ballots are counted, you can actually go to the polling station, whether that be in Dauphin, Brandon, or Winnipeg. You can go there in person. Even if you did get a mail-in ballot, you can still go there in person. You can say, I didn't get my mail-in ballot, or it's lost somewhere, and you can vote in person. So I know that previously it had been said that if you get a mail-in ballot, you can't show up to vote, but you can. All you got to do is sign an affidavit, and they'll witness the affidavit at the polling station. So I want everybody to be aware of that. If you did not get your mail-in ballot, or if your mail-in ballot was diverted to a different mailbox, you can still show up in person and vote at the polling station on that day. That's a very important distinction to be made, because I know that the mail-in ballot process is very imperfect, and I know that it can be manipulated. So I just offer that to our community members who may want to rethink how or to make a trip to the polling station in person rather than rely on that mail-in ballot. Not to say that mail-in ballots aren't good, because they are. If they're done properly and if they're on time, they're fine. But if something happened along the way with your mail-in ballot, you can still show up in person and vote. So I just wanted to make that final comment and say Kachimigwech, all my friends and family, and I'm looking forward to the election in this week and next. Miigwech. Good night.
All right, guys. So that was Derek Nipanak, and he just presented his platform. In my opinion, I thought he did a great job. Everybody else did a great job today too. So you got a lot of candidates to think about here, guys, and your advance polls begin tomorrow. Let's do that right now. We're just gonna pop it up so you guys can see. Where is that? Right here. So advance polls are starting tomorrow, Tuesday, June 22nd, Super 8 Hotel, 1457 Main Street in Dauphin, Manitoba, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. On Wednesday, June 23rd at the Victoria Inn, 3550 Victoria Avenue in Brandon, Manitoba, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the last day for advance polls are June 24th at here in Winnipeg, or not here in Winnipeg, but in Winnipeg at Marble Hotel, Churchill's Room, 331 Smith Street, also from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you had a mail-in ballot and you needed to get it in, it's due by the 23rd. So as Derek was just mentioning, if you guys want to go into advance polls and you guys want to vote in there, you're more than welcome to. Just got to let them know, and then they'll do the process there, make sure that everything is 100% legitimate. But you can do that if you didn't get your mail-in ballot on time. And I'm going to pop up our poster real quick. So here we are, turtlenationholdings.com. If you want to reach us via email, it's turtlenationholdings@gmail.com. That's our services right there, our mission and services. We ensure our clients that we provide a professional level of service for your projects, and we do try our best to do that all the time, guys. Quick commercial here too. If you guys want to find the stream in a day or two, you will be able to find it on Turtle Nation Holdings on YouTube channel. So I know that we stream live on Facebook, and this is going to be an uploaded recording. Everything that we record today, all 3 segments are going to be uploaded on there for you guys to watch. Find it on turtlenationholdings.com or Turtle Nation Holdings, sorry. I'll make sure that I post a link on the group page for you guys, and you guys can just copy that link, and then you can paste it via email, text, or even just post it on your own page if you want to. Let's see what else I got there. I think that's about it for now. And of course, once again, happy Aboriginal Day for everyone. I hope you guys had a great day. I hope you guys enjoyed the coverage for the Candidates Forum. A lot of great speeches, man. It's going to be a tough time trying to decide who you're going to vote for. I know that if I was a member, I'd be in a tough spot right now myself. So I'm glad that I'm not going to be the one coming out to vote, but you guys are. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday at advance polls, and then again on Tuesday, June 29th for Election Day. And that coverage is going to be here as well from Turtle Nation Holdings. So we'll see you guys then. I hope you guys enjoyed it. My name is Rod Arriagada, and if you guys want to follow me on Facebook, you guys can do so. And until then, next time, I guess that'll be June 29th. Have a great day, guys. Enjoy your day. Cheers.